Hello and welcome everyone in my brand new tutorial on how we can use Laravel and Angular 4 together. Now you might have watched some other tutorial and might have also come across some other free starter projects in GitHub. But the problem is, most of them out there sacrifices a lot of things that Laravel already offers out of the box. In other words, you will need to reinvent everything such as login, registration, authentication that already ships with Laravel. If that sounds like a huge headache for you, you are in the right place to avoid all that. During this course, you might come across few lines of code that might be hard for you to remember. But don't worry, because I will be uploading this completed project into a GitHub repository, and then I will put the link in the description below. Now without any further ado, let's dive right into the code. We have a root folder called Angular Laravel. There, I open a new terminal and create a new Angular project called Angular module. Then I open another terminal. This time I'll create a new Laravel project called Laravel module. Notice that I've used --dev because I want to pull the latest version of Laravel 5.5. It's going to take a little while for the project to download. The download is complete. I opened the Laravel module using PHP Storm behind the scenes. Similarly, I opened Angular module using Visual Studio Code. I go to the terminal and run php artisan serve. In a little while, you will see that the Laravel project will work on port 8000 in localhost. And it does. Similarly, I go to the Visual Studio Code and run ngserve. And in a little while, you will see that the Angular project will be running on port 4200 in the localhost. And it does. Now in order to set up authentication, you will need to run the following command: php artisan make auth. Once that's done, go to the browser and click refresh, and you will see two new buttons, login and register. After that's done, you will need to set up the database. For that, you need to go to the env file and put in your credentials. In my case, my database name is Angular Laravel, my username is root, and I don't have any password, so I leave that as blank. Looks like we're good to go. Now I click on register and put in my details. And whoops, looks like there's something wrong. And it turns out that I forgot to migrate. So I go back to my terminal and type php artisan migrate. Let's try this again, and it should work. And it does. Then I go to my routes file and paste in some code, which will return the details of the authenticated user. And if no one is logged in, it will force the user with ID 1 to be logged in and return their details in JSON format. And if we check the browser, sure enough, you can see the logged in user's information, which is me in this case. Now let's go back to our Angular project and try to pull that information. First, we need to set up ngOnInit method. Then we paste in some code that will fetch the information from the localhost port 8000/auth. The returned data will be saved in data variable, and we log whatever was returned in the browser console. When we check the browser console, we can see that something is wrong. It says no access control allow origin is present in the requested header. So to fix that, we go back to the Laravel project. Then we need to create a new middleware called course. Then we paste in some code that will allow all the requests from other servers. Then we need to specify the middleware that we just created inside kernel.php. Now let's go back to our Angular project and see if it works. And it does. In order to access the returned data, we need to create its corresponding model and specify all its properties. Then we need to import the model into our component, like so. Then we typecast whatever was returned to user model. Let's save this and see if it works. And it does. It works exactly like before, but this time we are typecasting it to a user model so that we can access its properties. Then we create a new variable called user of type user and assign whatever was returned to this variable. Then we go to the HTML template and replace the header to greet the authenticated user. If we check the browser, you can see that the name appears, but then there are some errors in the console. That happens because the name property was not there when the browser loaded. It comes from an API server and it takes time to reach the browser. To fix that, we put a question mark after the user property. That will make the name property to be printed only after it's received from the API. If we check the browser, sure enough, it's the same result, but this time there is no error in the console. Until this time, both the projects were working separately. So how can we copy the final build of Angular into the Laravel module? Let's try using ng-build command and see what happens. You can see in the Explorer that a new folder called dist was generated. This is the final build of Angular. But we want the final build to copy into the Laravel module. To do that, we go to the Laravel CLI.json file. Then we need to change the output path of the distribution folder. I put it in the public directory of Laravel module inside a folder called app. Now because it is inside the public directory, we should be able to access the contents of the folder directly from the browser. Let's try to build the project and see what happens. After the build is complete, we then check from the browser if it works. Notice that this time I'm not using port 4200, but I'm using port 8000, which is the Laravel module. We need to use the sub URL /app because that's where our project is located. It looks like something is wrong. The page looks blank, but if you go to the source code, you can see, in fact, there is some contents. However, if you click the source, you see nothing. The problem is the browser is not able to find the JavaScript file associated with this project. To fix this problem, we need to specify the base URL. Right now we have only a slash, which will not work for us. To fix that, we need to build the project again, But this time, we specified the base URL to localhost 8000/app. After it's done, let's check the browser to see if it works. And it does. We need to set up one more thing. Whenever the user logs in, rather than redirecting to home, we change it to the app that we just created. Now let's see that in action. And sure enough, it does redirect into the Angular project. Now let's do the same thing for registration. And sure enough, it still works. And this time, we see the name John Citizen instead of my name. Just to make sure, let's log out from here and log in using my credentials. And sure enough, it still works, and this time it greets me instead of John Citizen. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit the like button and click subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next one.